Welcome into the Gibson Fantasy Football Podcast. We are in the 2022 offseason in the height of free agency, and that's what we're here to talk to you about today. It is Sunday, March 20th. So we have just finished another weekend with some big trades and big signings as well. So we're going to be walking through free agency risers and fallers. I just wrote an article about it. It's Josh from the GFF team here, riding solo with you today. So I wrote about the biggest riser and faller so far, but we're going to cover all four positions in more depth here in the next four episodes. So today is quarterbacks. So let's jump right in. Let's get the negative out of the way first with the fallers. So, who is falling? Well, there are two big names that come to mind for me in terms of fantasy impact. The first one being Aaron Rodgers. We'll see the correlation on the flip side later with one of the risers, but he loses Davante Adams, arguably the best wide receiver in the game and one of the best wide receivers for fantasy as well. An aging asset, so maybe not so much in dynasty, but still an elite producer for fantasy. So can't help but think his stock takes a hit. I'll be interested to see what Green Bay does here in the rest of free agency, and even more so than that, probably the draft is really where I think they're going to aim to add some big time receivers. And there are some pretty great options available this year. So we'll see what they do, but for now, moves from sort of that, mid QB1 range to a low end QB1, in and around that area. And along with Aaron Rodgers, there's another big name, Dak Prescott. So they lose Amari Cooper along with Cedric Wilson. Obviously, Cedric Wilson not quite the impact player that Amari Cooper is, but still was kind of the fourth option on that team. They did retain Schultz and Gallup. Gallup got quite a monster contract there, so he'll be an excited fellow. But he's injured, and so we're not sure kind of what his status is going to look like to start the year. So probably playing without Gallup initially, playing without Cooper, playing without Cedric Wilson. Got Amari CeeDee Lamb still there, along with Dalton Schultz, who, as I said, they tagged. But it's looking a lot worse than it was just a month or so ago here. I think they too may make another addition, whether in free agency or the draft. But as I wrote about in the article, it's hard to replace Cooper's production and chemistry with Dak instantaneously. So I think he takes a hit for sure for this year, and maybe even longer than that. I think even from a dynasty perspective, it's a little bit concerning. Those are the two big names that stood out here. So let's flip over to the risers. Who are we getting excited about? Well, as we talked about with Davante Adams, there is a reaction and a counter reaction. And that counter reaction is Derek Carr. Las Vegas Raiders is where Davante Adams got traded to after they couldn't work out a deal in Green Bay. And it's a monster contract, but for Derek Carr's sake, he is going to be super pumped and super excited to have his college Fresco teammate there back on the team in the NFL. And so that takes Carr and moves him from kind of a low end QB2 into that mid, probably even high QB2 at this point. We'll see as we get closer and we start to kind of run through the options, but his stock is definitely up and gives him two really solid targets now with Adams and Waller. And they're probably not done either. They'll probably add a couple pieces because they lost Zay Jones and Bryan Edwards is still there. But outside of that, there's not really a lot of pieces left. The second person that comes to mind here would be Trevor Lawrence, rookie from last year, number one overall pick, paralleled to Andrew Luck. I mean, the hype was out of this world. Probably didn't give him a great shot to sort of live up to that just because of those expectations. Then you mix in Urban Meyer and you mix in all the chaos that was going on and the supporting cast that he had. They got the number one overall pick again. So that tells you everything you need to know right there. But certainly, one of the biggest issues was coaching, which they've addressed through Doug Peterson, and bringing in the assistant coach as well, or the offensive coach as well, and then on Press Taylor. And then on top of that, they had Laviska Shenault, they had Marvin Jones, and they had DJ Chark last year, and then they had to resort to Laquan Treadwell and Jamal Agnew down the stretch, who were not ideal options. So they've bolstered that. They added Zay Jones from the aforementioned Raiders. They added Christian Kirk, who was a free agent from the Cardinals. And then they added Evan Engram. And even more importantly, I think, than all of those, even though those are the fantasy players that we'll use unless you play IDP, is Brandon Sheriff, the left guard. So I think that will make a big difference there, blocking and protecting Lawrence, along with Christian Kirk being sort of the leader of that group. None of them are necessarily super intriguing fantasy options, but the sum of the parts is greater than any of the individual pieces in that situation. And the benefactor there will be Trevor Lawrence. So he's certainly on the rise as well. And he's our next riser there. Along with those two there would be Mitch Trubisky, who lands himself a job as the Steelers' starting quarterback. I got to like it for him. Will be interesting to see how that affects the rest of those options. We got some really important fantasy pieces there that we're relying on. And I think certainly with Mitch Trubisky's mobility and rushing upside, he becomes kind of interesting as a low-end QB2. Certainly has a better shot at steady production than Big Ben did. His arm was starting to fail him, and his body was nowhere near in the shape that Trubisky is. Be nice to see him get a fresh start after quite a rough time there at the end of his stay in Chicago. Hopefully being under Brian Daboll and behind Josh Allen last year did him some good, and certainly the Steelers think so. So great organization, great pieces, does become an intriguing player for fantasy, and certainly has his stock go up. The other one here, don't want to get into the politics side of things or kind of on the off the field stuff. That's still to be sorted out, but Deshaun Watson signs with the Browns, or traded to the Browns, sorry, who nobody saw coming. They were eliminated from the race. It was the Saints, and it was the Falcons, and all of a sudden it was the Browns. So that was quite a shocker. Not that necessarily the Browns supporting cast is fantastic. I mean, you got Amari Cooper, you got Chubb and Hunt in the backfield, and Njoku, I guess, but I mean, not a whole lot there. I don't think that they're done by any means, but I do think the offensive line is better, and Cooper would be probably the second best receiver next to Hopkins that he's ever thrown to. So certainly an upgrade there when he does get on the field, which could be this year. I'm not going to kind of project where he'll end up yet because we need to see how things play out. So yeah, certainly a benefactor there. He's on a new team. He has a team. He will play football at some point, presumably. And then the honorable mention is the former lead quarterback of the Browns, which is Baker Mayfield, who I think will find himself in a new position and hopefully a better position. I think it'll be better for him. I think he lands probably with somebody like the Colts or Seattle, both of which would be an upgrade in terms of weapons, offense, and probably even coaching staff, truthfully. So we'll see where that lands, but he could be on this list shortly as well. Some folks that were sort of left off because their situation is more or less neutral. Russell Wilson, he made the move from Seattle to Denver. Mahomes picks up Juju as an asset, okay, helpful, not huge. Wentz goes from the Colts to the Commanders. Yeah, again, not moving the needle for me. Stafford gains Allen Robinson, but loses Robert Woods. And then Tannehill gains an injured Robert Woods and loses a usually injured Julio. So, I mean, Woods is definitely better than Julio, but we just don't know when he's going to play. So all those situations are more or less neutral at this point for fantasy. And then the free agents that will or trade kind of candidates that we'll wait to see would be Baker, as we mentioned, Jameis Winston, and Jimmy G. So we'll see where they fall. We'll see kind of how that all shakes out. But if we get any updates between now and the remainder of the 3 other episodes, I'll cover those as we get started on those episodes. All right, so hopefully that was helpful to kind of review the landscape with the risers and fallers for quarterbacks. As I said, I'm sure there'll be more movement and more to talk about. And we'll be back with our next episode shortly, talking about tight ends in the coming days here. So look forward to talking to you about that. You can find us, GibsonFantasyFootball.com is the website, Gibson_FF on Twitter, Gibson Fantasy Football on Instagram. Please feel free to comment and like and subscribe if you enjoyed this today. And if you have any questions for us, hit us up on Twitter or the website. All right. Hope you have a great day. Good luck out there. And as always, clear eyes, full heart, can't lose.